Welcome to Life-Changing Challengers, the podcast where passion meets purpose. I'm Brad Minus, your host, guiding you through stories of transformation and triumph, from endurance feats to overcoming adversity. Our guests defy the limits and inspire action. Ready to ignite your desire and incinerate your barriers? Join us. Your journey to the extraordinary begins now. All right, and welcome back to Life-Changing Challengers. I am still your host, Brad Minus, and with me today, I am very honored and privileged to have Derick Johnson with me today. He has a program called Fit with Derick, and I have to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, I have not seen as many positive testimonials on this guy's site as you could possibly imagine. So this is going to be a rockin' conversation with Derick Johnson. How you doing, Derick?
Doing good, Brad. How you doing?
I am excellent on a Monday. So, Derick, as I ask everyone that starts my show, can you tell us a little bit about your background, the complement to your family, what it was like growing up where you did, and what your childhood was like?
Yeah, for sure. So first, I appreciate you having me on your podcast, Brad. Pleasure being here. So as a child, I grew up in Germany. My mother's German. My dad's African-American. My dad was U.S. Army for 23 years. And my mother, she's been a kindergarten teacher for about 45 years. And growing up with the German mentality of borderline OCD, keep things clean, really strict home. And then with the father, he was a country boy. He grew up on a farm in Starkville, Mississippi. So he's a farm boy. So the father, who was a farm boy, turned aviation, and the mother, who's from the city in Nuremberg. Americans would say Nuremberg. And so had that strict upbringing, but it helped a lot. It was very beneficial in a positive light of work ethic, education, doing right by others. So that's all I saw. So yeah, so as a child, grew up in Germany. And in third grade, that's when we moved to the United States. My dad was about to retire from the Army. And so he retired in Fort Rucker, Alabama. But he did not want us living in Alabama. So he moved us to Pensacola, Florida. And on the weekend, he would drive home. He was like, we're not living in Alabama. No offense to anybody in Alabama, but he just didn't want to live in Fort Rucker. You're probably familiar with Fort Rucker. Outside of that base, there's nothing.
Right.
Oh, yeah. So third grade, that's when we moved to Pensacola. And before all Europeans, or especially kids and teens, moved to the United States, we always watch American shows and movies. And we wonder, is it really like that in the movies? The bully, the cheerleader, the jock, the person get pushed into the locker, the mystery meat in the lunchroom. All the American stuff are like, is it really like that?
Yeah, well, in my case, it was. So, what about your case?
Oh, yeah, 100%. So once we moved to the States and I had my first couple of days in school, I was like, oh, yeah. I was telling my cousins in Germany, I'm like, it's exactly like the movies. Had the cheerleader, the jock, the bully, everything. So we moved to the States. And as a kid, I'm thinking Florida. I'm thinking we're close to Disney World. We're close to Miami. And as a European, you don't know.
Right.
So we moved to Pensacola, Florida, which is in the Panhandle. Beautiful city, beautiful beaches, but it does have a closed mentality. And I just wasn't used to that because I grew up being mixed and grew up around a lot of different cultures. Your Army as well, so you know how it is. Different cultures, different backgrounds. So that was our norm. So my school was split in half. And some of my friends were like, hey, are you on our side? Are you on this side? And I was like, what are you guys talking about? My lunch table had the most random people. I was like, I didn't care what your background was as long as you were working hard and positive person. But long story short, when I turned 11, that is when everything shifted. So up until the age 11, it was positive, beautiful family, good grades. Everything was going smooth. But once I turned 11, I realized that my parents started to drink a lot more. And it was only at night. So it never affected their career. My dad was always the first on base or the first with his platoon or company. And my mother was always the first to unlock the school. So it never affected their professional life ever. The only day that they missed of work is if they were in the hospital getting surgery for like a cyst or something or had the flu. Besides that, they didn't miss a day of work. Never saw them miss anything. And so growing up, they were both awake at 4 or 5 a.m., 7 days a week, working out. But the night before, between the hours of 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., they were drinking and they would release whatever anger, aggression, or emotion was happening in the right now, or 90% was from their past. but it would only happen after the guests would leave. So we had a beautiful house, 4 bedrooms, 4 bath, screened in pool. People are like, wow, your parents are so funny. They're so positive, this, and that. And I was the kid that would never want to bash anyone's reputation. So I would never complain. Nobody knew anything. I didn't say anything. Even my best friends didn't say a word, because I would always say, you know what? Somebody has it worse than me. I have both parents. Not all my friends have their parents. Some were in foster care. I was like, we live in a beautiful home. From the outside, looks great. But from the ages of 11 to 17, that is when I realized that there's a lot that I'd have to overcome. So how it began, they would just start drinking more at night. Once the crowd would leave, once the last person would leave dinner, once our neighbor would go back home, and they would just release anger, aggression, and that turned into physical, emotional, mental, and other types of abuse. But the very next morning, it would be, hey, want to go have breakfast? Where would you like to meet for lunch today? As if nothing happened. And the first year, at age of 11 to 12, it was a culture shock, because I was also getting beat up at school and then at home. So I was getting bullied in school because I was a skinny kid. I was very shy. I was timid. I was insecure. I had a stuttering issue. And at the age of 12, I made a pact with myself. And I said, from here on out, nobody else is going to have control over me. Not my family, not people in school, not people in public. I'm tired of feeling this way. So my step 1 into personal development at the age of 12 was fitness. I picked up the bodybuilding encyclopedia of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I read Bruce Lee autobiographies. I watched Bloodsport, Kickboxer, Rocky. Yeah. I grew up on all the Rambo. I grew up during that time period. And so I just immersed myself in real stories, fictional stories, but also life stories of individuals that overcame similar or worse traumas. And so my step 1 into personal development was fitness, because I got tired of being that skinny, mentally and physically weak kid. And so within about a year and a half, I completely transformed my physique. And I went from the shy kid in the class to then raising my hand, sitting in the front, leading group projects, doing public speaking. And my friends, teachers, and my parents' friends were like, who is this kid? Like, do you have a twin that just came out of the hyperbolic chamber? Like, who is this guy? You were somebody totally different a couple of years ago. And so I told people, I said, hey, I just got immersed in fitness and psychology. I was obsessed with learning about the body and the mind and how we could overcome stress, endure stress to our physical body, and endure mental stress, but come out positively in the end. And so with everything happening at home, of the physical abuse, of all the trauma and all that, is I realized that kids and teens that went through a lot of those things, they tend to give what they weren't receiving. So our home and our family ran like a business. We had dinner for like 5 minutes. All right, what do you got to do next? What's next? What's next? What's next? There was never, I love you. Let me give you a hug, affection. How was your day? How was this? There was none of that. It's like, what'd you get on the test? All right, that's it. All right, let's go study, go work out, go do whatever. So it ran like a system. There was no real affection. So on one side, it did help a lot. But on the personal side, I was missing that camaraderie of the family, that love, that feeling of being heard and understood. And so I learned that I was the kid and the teen who would give that to people. I really fell in love with learning people's stories, being present with them, actively listening, because I noticed that it was very rare to see that anybody would actually listen to people. They would just listen to cut them off to then tell their opinion, besides listening to understand. So I was that teen that always wanted to give somebody my time and actually sit with them. And so by the age of 15, I made so much physical and mental progress that people were asking me like, hey, can I work with you? And so at the age of 15, I actually got certified as a personal trainer.
Huh? Wait, I thought there was an age limit for that. I thought you at least had to be 18.
No, but back then it was 16, but I had a gym that like did the paperwork, and I became certified on paper at 15. And I started training my neighbors, my parents' friends, my teachers, my friends. I was also in Army ROTC in school and also in martial arts. So because I was in such a positive transformation, people just saw how mentally calm I was, and they wanted to learn like, hey, how'd you get in shape? And how do you never seem stressed? You always seem so blank. And I would teach them natural modalities. And I fell in love with the fitness aspect But at that time, but before I was even 16, I knew long term I was going to do something that was deeper than just fitness, performance, and helping people have a better relationship with food.
That's definitely something that's needed right now. And I mean, cut you off. I just want you to need to step back here for a couple minutes. I got a couple questions. One is, you said that your father moved you to Pensacola and he was driving back and forth to Fort Rucker, but to retire. So when did he actually retire? So and so third grade, you're like 8, right? 8, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So you're like 8, 9, and then you got there, and then about 11, you said, is when things started to shift at home. And at 12, that's my biggest thing. At 12, you realized that you needed to do all this changing, that you were going to make this pact with yourself. That's remarkable, because do you attribute that to your time in Germany and that structure?
I honestly attribute it to getting obsessed with learning people's comeback stories. So before the age of 12, I didn't have faith. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in the universe. I didn't believe in any of that stuff, because I was that kid that would ask the questions. Why does bad things happen to good people? Why does this happen to children overseas? Why is X, Y, Z? And nobody had answers for me. And so until I went through a lot of dark things, I realized I started having stronger faith with all the pain, because I knew what would happen if I picked up the bottle or picked up any drug. Because on both sides of my family, drugs and alcoholism is very rampant, and a lot of people have passed away from those things. So I knew in my bloodline, extremism and addictions ran in there. So I got addicted to fitness and personal development and mindset. And the first time of having an excruciating workout after honestly just getting my ass beat all night, once they would pass out drunk, I would go in the garage and work out. And after my workout, I would have such calmness. And that is when either I was delusional, either I was dehydrated, or either I was just outside of myself. But I started to have visions and hearing God, and he would just talk to me, and I would just pray. And it was only like after workouts when I would just have the equilibrium of there's no thoughts, there's no self-judgment, there's no emotions, and I was just blank. And I realized that I was working really well with my faith at that time period. And the reason why is because I wasn't learning a lot in church. I tried different churches. Nobody was answering questions. I was the kid that would just ask too much, and they're like, all right, he's asking too much. Let's get him out of here. Somebody tell him to shut up. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I got to go on my own journey, because nobody wants to answer questions. And fitness was the inlet. And then the secondary part of the personal development was my faith. And the faith came afterwards, after the workouts. And then eventually I learned that, hey, I can use both to my advantage. And so with that being said, I realized that my gift at the age of 12 was discernment. And I was consuming this type of information back then. Like, saying it now, it just sounds funny to myself. But when you see your mom almost die in your arms like multiple times, and then like blood on the floor and like all kind of violence at home, and you see all this stuff, and you've seen somebody overdose in your family and all this, you either choose that path or you choose the positive path. So I knew how like hell and darkness looked.
Hey, hang on, man. You can't drop stuff like that and not give us a little bit of detail. I mean, I know it might not be the easiest thing for you to think about, but you can't drop something about your mom almost dying and then glance over it. You got to give us a little bit of detail.
Yeah, for sure. So my mother's always been in amazing physical shape. She would always work out, and health was fine, but she was borderline diabetic. And sometimes when she was screaming, only when she was drunk. I don't know about all cultures, but German culture, Hispanic culture, and Korean culture are very similar in regards to when they're trying to get their point across, they will not stop until they fall asleep or pass out. Like, there's no off button. It's either on or falls asleep or passes out, like legitimately. And so add a couple bottles of wine to that and some anger and rage, and then there you go. So essentially what would happen is, I guess her sugar would drop from having excess wine. And while yelling, and mid-yelling, she would just pass out and like hit the tile floor and just pass out. And there was one time that it happened where she did not have a pulse. And I'm a teenager in this living room in this big, beautiful house in Florida. And 2 hours before that, the guests left. I'm like, oh, your family's amazing. And I'm just that kid that's like, I can just feel the darkness about to hit. And so the first time that it happened, she passed out and I'm feeling her and I don't feel a heartbeat. And I was in RTC and I knew all the basics. And so in that time period, I really didn't have fear because I was used to this kind of stuff happening. But at that in particular night, her pulse wasn't coming back. I did mouth to mouth, did the compressions, did CPR, my own mother. My dad comes in, he's drunk, and he's like, this is your fault. And he's like blacked out drunk. And he's like, oh, my wife is dead because of you and blah, blah, blah. And mind you, I had AB, honor roll, never got a referral in my life, never been arrested, never, like I did the stupid teenage stuff, but there was no reason for somebody to be that angry with me. And I knew that it was not me. And so with him screaming like that and with her being passed out, I'm like, you know what? I need to call 911. I can't do it in here because this might turn violent, them thinking I hurt my own mother. So I step outside, I call, and I'm just calm. Yes, ma'am, here's the address. My mother, there's no pulse, just need help, blah, blah. And so as I'm about to get off the phone, my dad comes outside into the front yard and just yelling. And they just hear a guy yelling in the background. My dad's like 6'3", just big ass guy. And they hear his deep voice. And then he's like, yeah, this is all your fault. And then the lady's like, did you do something to your mother? And I'm like, oh my goodness. I see where this is going. And so about 15 to 20 minutes later, fire truck, ambulance, multiple cop cars in this beautiful neighborhood just pull up, and it's like 10 p.m. It's probably like a Tuesday or Wednesday night, just during the week. All these vehicles are in front of the house, and I already called my friend at that time, and I was like, hey, can you guys pick me up? And I was too young to drive back then, but I had some older friends. I was like, I just got to get out of here. And so I'm waiting on my friend to come with all these people out here. And I'm just waiting to see, did my mother pass away? I just want an answer. That's all I want. And then I'll continue with my life. And so I'm standing in the driveway. They go in, the EMTs rush in. My dad's inside. And then I give it a couple minutes and then I walk to the front door. As I walk to the front door, I remember clear as day, there's this cop there. And he's like, hey, your dad told me this is your fault. Did you put your hands on your mother, son? And my blood is boiling at this point, but I'm staying calm. I was like, no, sir, I actually called. She's borderline diabetic. Sometimes she drinks. She was screaming. Blood sugar must have dropped. She literally just passed out. So if she has a concussion, that's why. You can check. That's what it is. There's no mark on her besides the back of her head. And he's like, you sure about that? I was like, yes, sir, I'm sure. How about you go look at her and not question me? And I'm just getting aggravated. I'm like, I just want to know if my mom's alive or dead right now. Like, can we stop this right now? And I'm like 13, 14 years old when this is happening. So everything's going through my head. I'm like, 1, I'm going to go to jail. 2, my mom's probably dead. 3, they're probably going to say that I did it or did some violence. And I'm just having all this stuff go in my head. And then out of nowhere, this short Hispanic EMT, she's probably like 5 foot flat. She just comes out of nowhere and just says, everybody shut the. And she's like screaming and all of us shut up. And she walks to the door and she says, sir, you should be thanking your son because I was about to walk here to tell you guys the bad news. And as I was walking up, your wife started coughing somehow. I did electric shock on her. I did check her pulse multiple times and she didn't come back. And as I'm walking to tell you guys the bad news, she starts coughing. So you should be thankful your son even called. And then I walk in. She's like, let him in. He didn't do anything. She had a concussion. There's no marks on her. And yes, her alcohol is very high in her bloodstream. So he was not lying. I said, thank you, ma'am. So I walk in and I look around in the living room and I see my mother on the couch. She has an IV and she comes back to her senses. But again, she's belligerent drunk. So she sees me and she's like, there he is. He did this to me. And I'm like, oh my God, is this like a movie right now? Because she's blackout drunk. She doesn't know what's even happening. And she's just screaming. And then my dad's like, yeah, you see this? And I said, I got to get out of here. I was like, ma'am, thank you for what you did. I appreciate it. So I walk out. My friend, luckily around that time, already pulled in the driveway. And then I left. But like, that's one example of one of those nights. So there's been multiple of those nights. And we're blessed that like both my parents are still alive. I don't know how my mother has survived that many nights, like literally not having a pulse, right. But sometimes that can happen. So on a side note, if people have alcoholism or drug addicts in their family, somehow some of them like just keep coming back.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense now why you were so calm. You know what I mean? For you to live through that and over again, it makes sense that you were able to, it's just another night. So you're able to remain calm. And then, of course, on top of that, you were, your personal development probably got you to the point where you were able just to sit back and, kind of push it down is basically what you did. You kind of held your feelings in is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Which is, in that situation, is what you want to do, right? Because you don't want to go off the handle and then everybody's starting to point the fingers, and they already did. The only marks on her should have been your compressions.
Yeah.
And that would have been evidence enough. And it sounds like the EMT knew that. So,
yeah.
But I can think of, I know most of the people that I've dealt with probably would not have had the sense or the ability to think clearly in that situation. So that's kudos. It kind of makes it, and we're going to get to it, but it definitely tells a story of how well you did in the military as well, because you kind of need that, especially when you're dealing with drill instructors.
Oh yeah.
All right. So yeah. So, okay. So you're 15, 16, you're in a public high school, I'm assuming?
Yes. I'm in public school, personal training in school, also in Army ROTC. And so a huge reason that I joined Army ROTC was I loved the military camaraderie, the aspect of it. I'd always watch my dad get up early, him and his buddies and all that, just that brotherhood. And I wanted to be part of that. And also I knew that my younger version still has some fears of heights, other fears. And I was like, all right, I need to face this. I did not want to do 20 plus years, but I knew that a temporary time period would help me a lot and it would look good on my resume. And I just knew I needed to get out of my comfort zone. So I did it more so for my younger version because he would have been scared. So that's why I honestly joined.
Yeah. I'm going to assume you haven't mentioned it, but I'm going to assume that you were an only child.
No, I had an older sister. So I have full sister, older. She was 5 years older than me. And then I have a half sister. Both are older. But my sister that lived in our home, she was actually a genius. So funny thing is she skipped 2 grades. And because I was just a normal kid that made A's and B's and I didn't skip a grade, I was compared to like the genius who didn't even have to try. And it was like a funny dichotomy in the home. So beautiful home, hardworking parents. At night, all hell broke loose. And they wouldn't really mess with her. They would just mess with me because I'm the youngest. And then she's like, what's going on? And she doesn't even have to try. She's like smoking weed in her room, just passing all the classes. And I'm like, so like I'm the kid who never smoked, never drank back then, never got in trouble. She was getting in trouble, but they're like, well, she's got all these full-ride scholarships already. Like we don't have to pay a dime and all like, so it was a funny dichotomy of the difference in the house. So I was the black sheep of the family. They were all cuckoo in a good way. They're all very intelligent, but they're all cuckoo in a good way. And it's all love. Like I could talk about it now, but it's just funny in hindsight to see that I was actually the non-crazy one in the home because I was the most neutral.
Yeah, I could see. Since then, has the partying at night faltered? Is it kind of lessened out since then?
I haven't seen them. My parents in about like 5 to 6 years.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm 34, so I haven't been in the house since 18. But I did keep in touch with them throughout the years, a couple years ago. But I will say for my own mental health, for my business growth, for my relationship growth and everything else, one of the best things I did for myself, just so I know this was 7 years ago, the best thing I did for my own mental health, besides starting my personal development journey at 12, was 7 years ago. So I was 27. And that was, I changed my phone number. The reason I changed my phone number is because I would receive drunk voicemails and drunk paragraph texts. But I mean 30 paragraph texts at odd hours of the day. And I would be on a coaching call, be in a gym, be on a date with my girlfriend, studying, improving my skill sets. And then out of nowhere, my phone would vibrate, whoop, whoop, and I would just see this random stuff that had nothing to do with anything in the present moment. And I knew it was just drunk rants. And it was just knowing that a narcissist, even if it's not family, but a narcissist, when they know that they don't have control of you and you don't need them in any kind of way for years on end, they want to find a way to sneak in and bring up something from your past to try to control and manipulate you again to overshadow their insecurities. So I knew this deep down. Like I knew the psychology, I knew their patterns and all this, but I knew that the only way that everything was going to take off in life was if I blocked access to myself from family. And not saying there's any hate or anger anymore, but it was just more so for me. I had to. And so if they want to contact me, there's email or social media. They end up in the message request folder, but I have control of if I want to respond. And so I had to do it for myself. So honestly, that's one of the biggest things that helped in regards to my adult mental health journey was just changing my phone number, because I'm not going to say nothing stresses me out, but normal things, as most veterans would agree, normal things in society don't really stress us because we've seen a lot. But the only thing that would still irk me is when that name or his name would pop up on my phone. And I was like, I'll just feel this annoyance or rage, and it would just make me angry for a couple hours. I'm a very positive, laid back person, love to make people's day. But the second that would pop up on the screen, internally, I'd be off for like 2 hours or 3 hours straight. Even if I wasn't thinking about it, just my whole body language, heart rate would be up. And it was just the interruption, because I'd be in a total flow state doing whatever I was doing. And I'd say, you know what? Let me just block the access. And so my goal for this year, now to come to the present moment, is to surprise them later this year in 2024, go to the home. But I'm going to do this and say, hey, before we have a conversation, I just would like you to sit down. Then I'm going to play my laptop on their screen. And I just want them to take 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how many are on there at that time period, to watch every single testimonial video and picture. Not to say I told you so, but just to say, this is why I went this path and didn't stay in the Army.
Okay.
Because they wanted me to stay in 20 years. Hey, you were Soldier of the Year multiple times. This is good, blah, 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 safe route. Because in their mind, coaching fitness equals broke bodybuilder. Like, that's the mentality they had. Broke bodybuilder lives in this truck. And I was like, you don't know the power of this thing. Like, so I was always using social media to empower people. And I realized that I was onto something. And so that's one of my goals for this year. And after I showed them that, it's more so like a thank you. I appreciate everything that happened. This is why I'm good at what I do. 90% of these videos are regarding life coaching. It's not just abs, nice legs, 225 on bench. It's more than that. There's also clients that got off drugs, alcohol, traumas, overcame those things. So I want them to see those videos and to say, I appreciate you. They just see my calmness. You guys helped me with this. Had to love you from a distance. But you guys gave me skills that I probably wouldn't have had if I would have not had this upbringing. So I appreciate you. And at that time period, if they'd like to have a conversation or a friendship or relationship, awesome. If they don't, also awesome. Because at least I know I feel good where I'm like, hey, I appreciate you with everything. There's no anger, hate, or resentment. But if we cannot have a common ground conversation, then hey, I'll talk to you guys in a couple of years. But yeah, so that's honestly just where I'm at. But again, it's just a neutral feeling of being grateful for what happened. So going to one of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins is, life is happening for you, not to you. And one of my other favorite quotes from Tony is, if my mother gave me the love I wanted as a child, I would not be the man I am today. If my mother gave me the love I wanted as a child, I would not be the man I am today. Those two quotes have stuck with me since I first heard them around 12 years old. Because my father would always listen to Tony Robbins tapes, Zig Ziglar and all that, which is funny because the night before it was like beating my ass. And the next day he's driving me to practice and we're listening to Tony. And I'm like, this is interesting duality. But that's where I am. And I do appreciate everything in life. So when I speak to people, I just challenge them to say, what gift or light can you find in the pain or in the trauma? What gift or light can you find in the pain or the trauma? So my gift, I realized at age 12, was discernment. I could feel people's energy. Strangers would come up to me and just open up. At first, it was overwhelming. I'm like, why is this old lady just pouring her heart out? She's like crying on my shoulder. I'm like, what is happening? But then I realized that was what was supposed to happen.
That's pretty amazing. And I think what you're coming upon is something that a lot of people in this generation that's popping up, it's self-actualization.
Yes.
Like you figured that out. You figured out, hey, that negative aspect that causes me this stress is my parents. And as much as they're my parents, my family, that's what's causing me this stress. So I need to eliminate that, not completely, because again, it's family, but enough so you can go on and continue to grow, as you want to. So it's basically turning adversity into empowerment.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah. So yeah, you'd be, for those listening, and Derick, if you want to give it a shot, I'd love to. One of my very first episodes is a guy named Luke Fernandez that kind of had somewhat of the same journey, except that he had to deal with depression in the midst. But he figured out what it was, just like you did. It was a self-actualization. But the other thing that he really figured out was fitness, and how he has a coaching business as well. And he's always like, no, first you got to start working out. That's it. He says, no, we're not touching the life coaching until you start working out.
Yeah.
You've been doing it for a month. I'll give you whatever you want. I'll take care of all your tools. And you seem to be kind of going on that same direction. And as far as I saw in your testimonials, I'm not sure if that's how you start. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I can see where the self-discipline and the flow state is kind of what you were describing when you talked about you going in to the garage and working out while your parents were partying, and finding that flow state. And that's kind of what got you to where you were. So now you deciding at 12 to hit the gym and start learning about personal development, that makes all the sense in the world, which is why I had to step you back a little bit.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, but no, it makes a lot of sense now. So, all right. So let's say you graduated high school.
Yes. So graduated high school in Pensacola, Florida. And then I went to the University of West Florida. I had a full ride scholarship with Army ROTC. Along within the state of Florida, we have a scholarship called the Bright Future Scholarship. Mm-hmm. And so I had those. And so parents were happy. Didn't have to pay a dime for anything. So that was cool. But deep down, I just knew that I wasn't going to be doing full-time Army for 20 plus years. So in college, I studied exercise science, and I also studied a minor in military science and psychology. I love the brain. I love the body. And a lot of what I do now is mind-body connection rather than just performance or just tell me about your trauma. I cover both so that way we can fully overcome it. So we're not just talking or only working out, because that was the missing piece. But definitely in college is where I got deeper into my coaching modalities, because I realized that having discernment gave you the skill to capture people's patterns quick. Because I caught my patterns of my family, myself, even like my response to them and their response to me and vice versa. And I'd always see things at a higher level. And I just fell in love with that. And growing up as a quiet kid, I was always literally the DD for my parents, even way before I had a license. But I would sit in the corner, eat the food at their friend's house, and just people watch. And I was like, this is like a reality show in here. I'm like, he went to the bathroom, they talked about him and vice versa. I'm like, what the? But it was interesting because I learned so much about psychology, just growing up, being that fly on the wall, just watching people. And so bringing that into Army ROTC and field training, I could sense the soldiers' energy off if it was something personal, something from their past, something happening right now. And I would always pull them to the side or approach them strategically in a different way. And I realized it came really natural. So the unapproachable person that was really aggressive and all, that was like the easiest person to talk to, because you could sense that they were just overshadowing something. And whether that was male or female soldier. And then on the flip side, the quiet one. And then them learning like, oh, wait, he does relate to me. And I tell them a little bit about myself. We speak. And I just always loved making somebody feel heard or understood, because I knew what it felt like to not feel that. And in hindsight, I was like, man, this is amazing. Life prepared me for all of this. And so in college, I really fell in love with psychology and the natural modalities. Like, I have nothing against therapists, nothing major against big pharma. I think a lot of things are unnecessary, but I did realize that a lot of people hit a wall and they're stuck. And I wanted to do everything I could to help people get unstuck by, maybe they forget because they feel so good, they forget to take a prescription, or maybe they forget to keep going to the therapist because now they're making actual progress and not just venting every Tuesday and Thursday, putting themselves in a dark place for 3 hours. And again, therapy can help. It is effective. But I've worked with many people that had the same therapist for 5 to 10 years, and they've been in the same position. And we work together for 1 month and they make such major progress. And it just makes you wonder, like, what did he or she have you doing? How many times are you going to repeat what happened when you were 12 without having much progress? So that's what always irked me. So that's what inspired me deep down, is to help people break their patterns so they can feel like they have control, like they're thriving, not just surviving. And also to show them that They don't have to be codependent on a person or on a substance to get through things, to mask things, or to take the edge off. So that's my deepest passion, is to show people that the power that they're searching for is actually already within them. It's always been within them. They just have to get rid of stuff first. So teaching them how to get rid of these things, and they're like, wow, I'm the one in control. Their food, their mindset, their reaction to people, to their toxic family, toxic boss, traffic. They're not speaking about somebody that cut them off in traffic 7 a.m. to their family at 7 p.m. at dinner. Like, you won't believe what happened this morning. It's like, it was a 2-minute interaction. Why are you still talking about that? Like, it's 7 p.m. You're having dinner with your family. What is going on?
Oh, I completely agree. And I get you, because I have to, I don't know how you felt in basic, but we had, one drill instructor that was loud and just yelling at us all the time. Then you had the one that was like reserved and quiet. And I was more afraid of him, because he'd be just like, all right, Prav, you know what you need to do, and just go do it. It's like, you knew that, all right, you're getting down and you're giving him 20. Then he'll tell you, all right, flip over, Prav, flip over. All right, shuttle, give me some flutter kicks. Let's go. Just like that. The other guy would be like, you better get down and give me 20 right now.
Oh, yeah.
That guy didn't scare me. I knew he was coming, but the one that was quiet, you didn't want to mess with him.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, no, I get it. I had a client that, lost a partner, and it was getting him out on the bike, and we're doing like multiple threshold rides, and that you start to get the endorphins going.
Yes.
It's interesting because they can start talking, and because of everything going on in their body and their brain, now all of a sudden they could talk rationally.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas when they are in a normal resting heart rate and their mind is going, because their body's not doing anything, they'll break down. They'll have this thing when they can't really think about it logically. All of a sudden you give them some endorphins to where it kind of cuts off that kind of a depression state temporarily.
Yes.
So, it was amazing. It was literally amazing that all of a sudden, where he would be crying, all of a sudden he's just really mellow and just, yeah, this is what happens, kind of feeling bad about it. You know what I mean? I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have a plan. And I was like, Great, you got a plan. So I get that. Yeah. Sometimes I wish therapists would like put people on treadmills.
Yeah, exactly.
In
like
their office.
Subtle things like that people don't pay attention to. It's always the small things that are basic, simple, and straightforward that people overlook. Like, there's no way that just walking can help that way. I'm like, well, if you do a combination of walking and talking, and there's a term, I forget who originated this quote, but in psychology, there's a term that goes, if the problem is in the mind, the solution is in the body. If the problem is in the body, the solution is in the mind. So essentially, if somebody's in a negative headspace, they can't think themselves into a more empowered or positive headspace, because they're going to think it's fake. But if they move the body, stretch, walk their dog for 5 minutes, jumping jacks in place, whatever they want to do, just change their state, their physicality, move, shake, play some music and dance for a song, do whatever, play with their kid, play fetch with their dog. After that, if they do something for the mind, it's way more effective, because the mind is open and they're not self-judging. They're more in an excited flow state. Same thing with being on the 15th mile on the bike, and then he starts talking and just opening up, and it's just flowing, making sense. He's not breaking down. You're like, wow, this is amazing. And so that always stood out to me. And the same thing in reverse. If the problem is in the mind, if the problem is in the body, the solution is in the mind. Meaning, if the person's like, am I having an anxiety attack? Step one, what have I consumed? Am I dehydrated? Did I have water? Did I have coffee before I even had 2 glasses of water? Yeah, I just dehydrated myself before I was dehydrated. So now my anxiety's up, my heart rate's up, I'm dehydrated, and I'm about to fall asleep. So it's like, sometimes we got to add up the basics, but it's so interesting. So everything that I do is just so straightforward. We can go deeper, but it's not until later on in the programming, until, as you mentioned, they start making the progress, having the confidence, and I just call it stacking wins. Once they've stacked a lot of wins and have built that momentum, they're confident, then we can say, all right, he's in a good zone. Now let's talk about the deep stuff. And they're more open to it, rather than first conversation. Like, hey, pleasure to meet you, man. So tell me what happened when you were 7. What'd your uncle do to you? Well, right. It's nearly impossible for some people to just open up right on the spot. So it's always interesting to see what the best approach is at what time period for a specific individual, and also their communication style. That's what I feel a huge disconnect is within companies, leadership, therapy, wherever somebody is in a controlled environment and they have a leadership that does not communicate differently with each individual. They more so are stuck in the knife hand mode. If you are listening, the knife hand mode is the drill sergeant or the army guy just in your face pointing, or the alcoholic parent screaming. So that different approach of speaking to them like a human or pulling them aside instead of embarrassing them in front of the team. But it's crazy to me how leadership training is so rare, where us military guys or even like sports coaches teach corporate America and they're like, wow, this is some groundbreaking stuff. But internally we're like, wait, like no wonder you guys have such high turnover rate. Like, what'd you expect? But again, it doesn't click for some, but that's where we come into play. But it's just crazy how a lot of people, companies, and organizations just overcomplicate things. They think super high level, and we just bring it down simplistic. Just follow these steps. Let's elevate the team's morale, your own morale, and then we can start to go deeper, opposed to just this high level thinking, which they can't absorb it or they can't take action on it, or they just think it's just fluff. Well, it's not going to work. So it just always has blown my mind how good leadership is so rare nowadays. And it makes sense why
I totally agree. Yeah. Getting back on what we were talking about before. Yeah. There's several stories of some ultra marathoners that, they're running first 100-mile races. And I've got a couple of clients that have done it. And they said that like things open up like at 75, 76 miles, 77, 80 miles. They like emotions just like pour out, things they've never, ever thought about before in their life. And it all comes pouring to the top and they get really emotional, but it's so cleansing. Like it lets it out, but it lets it out in such a healthy way. And you like can't figure out. One woman was telling me she couldn't figure out whether she was laughing or crying because it was just this outpouring of emotion. But she said when she was done and she was able to reflect on everything that was going on in her head, that it was a very, like she said, cleansing. It was like all that stuff, all that extra stress that she's been holding on to. But then when you're done and you've let it all go, now it's even keel. It's almost like starting from scratch again, like you've got a clean slate. And I think that's what you're talking about here is you get them into those wins, stacking the wins, and then you can sit them down and go, okay, well, let's talk about this. And then they get that clean slate.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's amazing. So, all right. So University of West Florida, is that what you said?
Yes. University of West Florida. That's in Pensacola, Florida.
Okay. So you stayed did you stay at home while you were in school? Or did you go?
No, I was on campus.
Okay.
No, I wasn't. Go back. But no, I was on campus because of the Army ROTC program there.
Okay. So it was Pensacola. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty big, decent program. When I was in ROTC, it wasn't the biggest or the greatest program in the world. I mean, we got to do a lot of stuff, but it wasn't, it wasn't great. It wasn't something that didn't even meet as often as like you would be if you were in a fraternity or something, right?
Yes.
So I imagine, so the Army ROTC actually put you up. Is that you stayed in, I wouldn't say a barracks, but it was a dorm that was kind of...
Yes, dorms, apartments, really nice apartments on campus. So military paid for it, plus tuition and fees.
Oh,
and
nice.
I had the other scholarship, which helped like pay for food and everything. So I wanted to just take advantage of that and just be on campus. And in ROTC now, in Army ROTC at least, you have class 2 days a week. It's for 2 hours. And then you also have PT 3 mornings a week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so I would just like walk to formation and all that. So it was just convenient. And it all worked out because I also worked at the gym there as well. So I could just walk to work and then walk to classes. So that's my real reason for joining.
Yeah. Perfect. So were you one of the guys that did you go to basic between junior and senior year?
No. So I did not go to OCS. So I actually got out of ROTC and I went National Guard because I got introduced to some leadership. We really clicked and I got a clear path to what decisions I wanted to make. So my original thought was criminology, military intelligence, Army officer, go that route. But with the route that I was on and working with so many people throughout college, I was like, I think I'm onto something. I work with so many people who have these skills. I can't just say, hey, I'm putting this on pause. I'm just going to go active and the heck with training or coaching. So I saw a clear path. So I went 5 years active So my junior year, I did go to basic, and that's when I went to basic, did 5 years active, and then I finished with the last 5 years of Army National Guard in the state of Florida. And in basic, going back to what you were mentioning earlier with the different drill sergeants, mine were similar. I had 3. You had the African-American female who wouldn't stop screaming, and she was just like an annoyance in your head, but she would smoke the shit out of you. And then you had the very calm infantry guy that had everything you could think of on his chest. It was like 5'2", just chill, white guy, just like, Johnson, go. And he would barely say anything.
Yeah.
When he was yelling, you had to have done something when he was yelling. And then our lead instructor was a Filipino. He was one of the best leaders in the Army I've ever met. And to this day, like, we keep in touch via Facebook and all that. And he's just an awesome guy. He's a master sergeant now, but just his leadership style was one of the best things. So those 3 different, this is like the 3-headed beast. You had the country black girl from like outside of Memphis, just screaming and yelling, get you in crazy shape. And she would teach you really well. And then you had the infantry guy who was really calm and confident. He would teach you everything in the field with the weapons. And then the overall well-rounded leader, just calm and could also snap into place, was the Filipino drill sergeant. So I just love that aspect of it. But with day 1 and 2, Shark Week as a whole, Shark Week essentially for non-military is when you get off the bus and all the drill sergeants run up to you. So that first week, you're just like a chicken with the head cut off, deer in the headlights look, don't know where to go because they're just playing a mental game. At that time period, when I first got off the bus and 7 were surrounding me and just screaming, it took everything within me not to bust out laughing. The reason why, because in my head, I was like, my 5'2" mother would destroy all of you, and my dad would freaking throw y'all through a wall. And I was just like, wow, they prepared me for this, because it was crazier at home than right now. I was like, and I get paid to be here and I get free food. Awesome. This is a walk in the park. So honestly, the mental and physical aspect, I actually really enjoyed basic because of the upbringing and because I loved the challenge. And I was like, wow. Yeah. And then in those moments, it clicked. And I said, all right, our beautiful home was the training ground for all this. So, and as you know, when you're, when they can see that you're not scared, they'll choose somebody to be the platoon guard. So they chose me because I was just calm in those environments. And then everything just started to click. I'm like, I'm supposed to be here. And then I would see the male or female soldier. I went to Fort Jackson, so we have male and females. Some would call it relaxing Jackson, but we still got our ass kicked. But in general is that the individual who's 18, 19 years old that is scared out of their mind, has never witnessed anything like this. I could see my younger version in them, then I'd approach them differently. And then the same thing with like the people that grew up in a rough home, you could see that they were calm. But I just love seeing the dichotomy of different communication styles, different ethnicities, and just different people's reactions to the stress, lack of sleep, dehydration, being hungry. And those environments, I feel like the best leaders truly thrive in those because you're not worried about yourself in that moment. Yes, I'm tired. Yes, I'm dehydrated. Yes, I feel everything everyone else feels, but you have soldiers that depend on you and another version of you just takes over. And that's my favorite part of that basic or any other Army training school where you feel just you can't go anymore. You haven't slept in 3 days, but something just takes over. And for 2 more days, you just go hard and lead by example. And it's just incredible.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was after basic. When I finished basic, I felt like it was the greatest thing ever. Now, I went to Fort Sill with the field artillery.
Oh, yeah.
And I was one of the last all-male classes.
Okay.
Right? So my whole battery, back then, battery had, and then, platoons, my whole battery was guys. And all the drill sergeants were guys. So they beat up on you a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they didn't have a problem. Yeah, broke my hand during BRM. I was trying to, you're supposed to keep it nice and set. The barrel is supposed to be nice and steady in your hand, right?
Yes.
And I just needed just like a couple of millimeters. I needed my sight up just a couple millimeters. So I just up like this and I just kind of picked the batter up just enough. And Drill Sergeant Marchman saw me and he came over and he goes, put that back in your hand. And he steps on the barrel right onto my hand and literally crushed my hand. So, but finished out BRM because I wasn't saying anything. I wasn't going to be one of those sick layman lazy that was going to go get a profile. Yeah. That wasn't happening there. But interesting enough, when I went to AIT, I went to Fort Jackson.
Okay. Interesting.
So I was there for AIT, and I'll never forget it because, like you said, they had already been doing co-ed basic. So they'd already been around. And I get there, and there's two of us coming from Fort Sill into Fort Jackson. But with all the traveling and stuff, we don't get there till like 9 p.m. And everybody's like scattered around the barracks, and they're all in PTs and stuff. And because we come from Fort Sill, Class A's, everything's perfect. We're at parade rest, sitting in there waiting for the sergeant that's on CQ to assign us a bunk, rack. And this girl comes out. PTs are like, like the zipper's halfway down and hood's not right. And her stuff's, she's at this very weird off kilter at ease position. And she's like, and the sergeant telling her something to do. And she goes, "But sergeant." And I look back at my friend where we are at perfect military bearing.
Yeah.
We are straight up. And I looked at him and I was like, is going on? This is not right. This is not where we came to. And that was like culture shock for me, being that the military was in that way. But once I got out of Fort Jackson and I got to permanent duty in Korea, went back to being full military bearing. So I was grateful for that. So, all right. So you end up going to basic between junior and senior year, and then you get out. Do you go to AIT right after outside of college?
I went to AIT in Fort Gordon, Georgia.
Right.
And that's where a lot of satellite communication is. You have some of the biggest satellites there and a good training school. So Fort Gordon, Georgia, that's where I went to AIT. And a lot of commo guys, a lot of SF guys, Rangers are there because some of us will train with them because obviously they need us a secondary and primary. But I loved it there, honestly. It was a good experience because I got to get back in my zone. And because of basic, I actually lost 20 to 25 pounds in basic. So, and it was like all muscle because you're not hitting the weights. So like internally, I was like, I'm shriveling up. I'm becoming that skinny kid. I'm not going back. And so AIT, I was just going to class, going to DFAC, and going to the gym. And everybody was like, "You want to go to the hotel party?" I was like, "Nope." And they're like, "Man, you're just in such a zone." I was like, "You don't know how happy I am. I can just walk to the gym, walk to the barracks, go to class." And I was like, "I'm actually enjoying this." And then I'd go to like Hooters or Buffalo Wild Wings on the weekend some nights to watch a game or a fight or something. But besides that, like I didn't party, didn't drink or anything. And it's just funny now in hindsight that some of my current active clients I actually met way back when. And they're like, "Dude, you're still like in that same zone." And they're like, "I didn't tell you that back then, but you impressed me every time you turned down a drink." And I was like, I wasn't judging. I just didn't want to do stuff. And it's just funny because I don't think about it. And nowadays they're like, man, that I always thought about that. And now I'm like, good. I'm glad I didn't give into the peer pressure.
Right. Yeah. When I went to basic, I was the opposite. I was the skinny string, being like you were talking about, you were before. And I walked out of basic, I gained 30 pounds.
That's awesome.
I mean, I walked in at 130, I got out of there 160. But I was like, nobody could recognize me because it was bloated. It was kind of like bulk phase.
Yeah.
Me. It was like I bulked all out and then got to AIT, and I did the same thing. And free time when able to do it, we just went to the gym and then all of a sudden shredded out. So when I got home after AIT, man, it was, that's probably the best I've ever looked. It was great. And today, and we were talking about this earlier about the generations and stuff and how they're going through, kind of, well, we didn't mention the word, but it kind of like a victimization. I feel like here, and I've said this before to a lot of people, and I think like every 18-year-old should, whether they go to the military, whether they serve or not, they should all have to freaking go to basic.
Exactly. I totally agree. Because especially if they don't have a good home life and no structure. And I totally agree with that. Like I work with some teenagers where I'd wonder, like, how do you not know these basic things? Like, I love coaching people, but sometimes like, where's the common sense?
Right.
But I can't be mad at the teen. It's mom, dad's, foster parent, grandma, whoever was their guardian angel, or their guardian in that household. Just makes me wonder, like, what was the shift? Because I'm 34, so I grew up on dial-up internet to change it for the fax machine, and then we went through Facebook and Wi-Fi and et cetera, et cetera. So we had like the best of both worlds. So now this new generation, a lot of them do work hard, but the ones that are coddled too much, best way to put it. It's just scary to see like where some of them are going of not having basic life skills, whether it's common sense or whether it's just analytical thinking. But that's where good leaders come into play, because if without good leaders, this next generation would be not all of them will be screwed, but a lot of them would, because of just the lack of training, lack of good upbringing, lack of discipline, and even general respect. But the ones that do have a good head on their shoulders, they are working really hard, very intelligent, especially with the tech space and cybersecurity and all that. But the big picture, it's rare to see when they're really focused and have, I'm in the South, even just manners. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Like that's so rare with this generation. In my head, I see these kids out when I'm at the mall and I'm like, man, my parents would slap the shit if I said that.
Oh, no, I agree. So you get out of Fort Gordon. Where was your first duty station?
So I get out of Fort Gordon and then I go to Pensacola, Florida. So my Army unit was Pensacola, Florida. Pensacola is actually known as the Navy, as the main Navy base. So you have the Blue Angels are from there. So a lot of people are familiar with the Blue Angel Air Show, the jets. And so they started having Army there as well. So I was at an Army attachment there for satellite communications. And then we would travel a lot. So we would go to Central and South America, do exhibitions for like 3 to 6 months. And it was just different training environments. So personally, I've never been to the Middle East. I was never deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, or anywhere. My buddies were. But my unit detached, we went to Central and South America, and we'd also go to South Florida a lot to give commo to Southcom, to some of the SF. And it was very interesting. Like I learned a lot, but I was surprised that I went south instead of east or west. But I was in Pensacola, and then I would bounce around to different training schools. But the majority of my time was in the Pensacola area, and also at Camp Blanding is a small training base outside of Jacksonville, Florida. And we would spend a lot of time there. So Army active duty and guard are there a lot. Like it's completely empty when nobody's there training. So everything is super dusty and it's super sketch. But I have a lot of memories there. It's in the middle of nowhere. So I did air assault school there, a lot of other schools. And so with me being satellite communications and on the verge to going guard, I was bouncing throughout Florida and then going to Central and South America.
Sweet. Yeah. So you got some good experience with the military. Yeah. I don't know where I would have been if I wasn't in the military when I decided to go. And I went a little bit later. I'd already been to college, and I guess the same thing as you. Yeah, basically. We were both of us were a little bit older when we finally went to basic. Yeah. Oh, that was the one thing I never, that you had talked about that earlier. I remember these kids at 18 years old. Oh, no drill sergeant's I'm just going to laugh in his face. Right. And I was like, okay, let's see you do that. Yeah. Never seen such scared kids in my life.
Oh yeah. They're about to pee themselves. The kid,
exactly.
But the neck. Exactly. I had one guy that had a huge Chevy symbol and like some other gang stuff on his tats. And he's like, I'm not going to be scared. And he was crying. And I was like, I told you, man. I was like, that street stuff, it doesn't matter here. I was like, dude.
Yeah. So you ended up there for 5 years, and you decided to get out.
Yeah. So I did 5 years active and then 5 years National Guard. When I was in the Guard, I was actually living in Miami, and I would drive the state of Florida because we would have drill in different cities throughout Florida. And so Florida's my home state, and like I know it like the back of my hand. So I would literally drive the 12 hours from Miami to Pensacola. A lot of people don't realize that Florida's actually that big. So I would drive all throughout, and then I also had a place in Orlando. So I would like stop. And so during that time period, I was in Miami. I was growing my coaching business, a lot of in-person boot camps and a lot of life coaching. Life coaching was 90% online. And a lot of the in-person coaching was boot camps and one-on-one. And I was guard then. So I was obviously weekend warrior or every couple of weeks or whatever school that I would go to. And I was just dedicated on building the coaching business. And last but not least, the biggest reason I went to Miami is I pursued modeling and acting. I was with Elite Model Management, the modeling agency, because I wanted to see if I could become an actor. And long story short, had some cool experiences, traveled to different countries, but you realize quickly you can't get to the next level without doing weird stuff. So I made it as far as I could being myself, showed up on time, in shape, helped the team out. But then you realize that The rabbit holes that most of us know about are definitely real. So I hit the ceiling in the industry just being myself. And I was like, all right, in order for me to get hired in this industry, you're going to have to do some sketchy stuff or be around very dark people. So I was like, I have discernment and I have strong faith. I believe in God and Jesus Christ. So I was like, I can feel the shift happening and I need to get out of this industry. And I never did drugs or anything, but I just being around some of these people. So like some examples, some amazing things I did in the industry. I was in a couple commercials with Samsung for their smart gear watch and was doing lunges, running on the stadium, like doing some awesome commercials. I was only in there for like 2 seconds, but awesome experiences. And then I kept going up and traveling the States, getting gigs in different countries. And then just after a while, I would get invited to the Hollywood parties, the New York penthouse parties. And then you'd see the sketchy stuff that's happening there. And I was like, all right, this is not for me. And so this is a guy growing up in alcoholic drug family and coming military. We're clean, we're focused and all that. Then you go into the industry, you're excited. You're like, all right, I'm going to show up. I'm going to study this dialogue. I'm going to do this script to see how far I can go in the industry and act and model. And then you realize really quickly how political it is and how dark it is. And you're like, all right, those rabbit holes that I went down as a kid are definitely real. So then I was like, well, at least now I know I've faced it. And then I'm going all in on the coaching business. So a huge life takeaway for people is to, whatever your conscience is guiding you to do, just go for it and see what happens. I went for the Army, went for coaching. I wanted to see what I could do with modeling or acting. I saw that it was going to go down a weird path. And I said, you know what? Everything always comes back to the basics, empowering other people. That fulfills me more than anything. So just to share with people is whatever truly fulfills you at your core, do more of that thing. Even if you don't know how to get there right now, things are going to come together. You might want to go different routes, try some different things out. But if something's always gravitating you back onto your track of what your deep passion is, that's what I truly feel that God, whatever that individual believes in, has you here for that reason. And I truly believe that my reason is just to flip my pain into fuel, help heal other people, which helps them win, creates a positive ripple effect for people in their life, and then also heals our own inner child for it to win. And not in a selfish way, but you probably relate to that. You see a client thriving. He just got engaged. She lost 20 pounds. They just crossed the finish line, beating their time by 10 minutes, but it's deeper for them. They're like, man, 10 years ago, I was drinking. I had a divorce. And it's always the deeper aspect where you're getting chills. You're almost tearing up seeing that text message. And you're like, oh, man. So that's definitely one of the best things. And then you think back on your younger version, you're like, damn, we were that close to quitting or that close to pivoting or that close to getting into corporate America or whatever thought we had to go or we thought we were going to go because somebody said, that's the safe route. You need to go that safe route. So I'm just happy that I never went the route that others wanted for me. I wanted to do Army. I wanted to test out the industry and I wanted to coach. And I'm glad I did all three because most people are like, you can't do all those things. You can't do this and can't do that. I was like, F this. I'm going to be the monopoly. I'm going to be the analogy of just facing what you want to face and going your own path.
Yeah, no. And then, and you did, and you're only 34. So there's a lot more avenues for you to go. So I'm looking forward to seeing where you end up, but I'm excited for everybody. If you're, I would tell everybody here that you need to at least go check out Fit with Derick. And if you see it on the screen or not, it's Derick. Fitwithderick.com. Go check it out. He's got this amazing video that he talks about and on the front page. Listen to that and then scroll down and take a look at all the testimonials and read some of them because they will light you up. So remember, that's fitwithderick.com, Derick. And I'll put that in the show notes. And Derick, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm telling you, everybody, you need to go check it out. But
I appreciate it, Brad.
Yeah, thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. I think people are going to see a lot of similarities with some of the things that, you went through and were able to accomplish and you took a adversity and basically, and then just turned that into an empowerment. And I'm grateful. Yeah, I'm definitely grateful that they were able to spend some time and grateful to know you because definitely we need people like you out there,
I really appreciate it, Brad. I just love powerful conversations, especially with other veterans. Just good to get connected and talk about topics that matter instead of just Tom Brady, Kobe, MJ. Who's doing this? It's like, I don't care.
No, and I'm hoping that maybe somewhere, down the line, we'll meet up again and we'll literally have a discussion based on like training science or something as we start to morph this podcast. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Brad.
Thank you. And for all of you out there, don't forget, go ahead and share, like, whichever platform you're looking on. And we will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Well, that wraps up another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. I'm your host, Brad Minus, saying thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation. If today's stories inspired you, please take a moment to review, share, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more listeners and create an even bigger impact. Remember, every challenge is a chance to grow. Until next time, keep pushing, keep challenging, and never stop pursuing your extraordinary.